Hi, my name is Bethany Watrous, and I'm going to talk about digital heritage and how we can use immersive technology to better understand the past. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself first and what I'm doing, and then I will go into my case study at Slingsby Castle, and then follow up with some current and future research projects. So just a little bit about me. I'm a digital archaeologist, and I just started a company called Experience Heritage, which is a cultural heritage consultancy. And I'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the talk. So I received my master's degree in archaeology of buildings from the University of York, and I'm really excited about how we can use digital technology to not only research lost structures, but then using the outputs of that research to engage the public. So now a little bit about Slingsby Castle. So it's a ruin on the site of an earlier medieval moated castle from the 13th century. It's now a ruin of a Jacobean manor. The site is really unstable, it's not safe for visitors, there's overgrowth. So the community is trying to decide whether or not they should modernize the site and allow visitors back on, or if they should just continue to allow it to decay as it has been. So my project's research intentions were to illuminate the builder's intentions for the site, understand the landscape and the impact of the building on the landscape, and then hopefully reveal some knowledge gaps through the digital modeling. For stakeholders, it was a way to understand the site's history a little bit better, to provide accessibility to the inaccessible, and then to provide interactive displays for the public to engage with. So for the site, we were really fortunate that the Royal Institute of British Architects had in their archive a collection of original floor plans and elevation sketches for Slingsby, the manor at Slingsby Castle. There were two different versions within that archive. One was an earlier design drawn by the famous Elizabethan architect Robert Smithson for Sir Charles Cavendish I, and we believe that this version was never built. And then the later design, which was what ended up being built, was designed by John Smithson, who was Robert's son, for Sir Charles Cavendish II. So we've got this site with two buildings intended for it, and this familial connection between the two buildings. So a lot to work with there. So originally we had planned to use site survey and photogrammetry to capture what was there and to better understand what had been there. Unfortunately, we did not get access to the site in time for this project, so we ended up having to use exclusively historical references as well as comparative studies of modern structures that still stand today. And now we'll take a look at what we were able to gain from just that evidence. So this is the unbuilt design, designed by Robert Smithson for Sir Charles Cavendish I. And this will be the built design by John Smithson for Sir Charles Cavendish II, and this is what is in ruin today on the site. So one thing that we were able to explore with these digital models was the difference in intention between the two structures. So the actual built structure was a lot smaller than the original design, but there's a lot of similarities still. We still see this Cavendish passion for architecture. We see the medieval make-believe and the castle-like illusion, but we also see the modern use of device that was going on in the Jacobean time. Another thing that we were trying to look at was whether or not either design intended to use any part of the medieval structure that might have still stood on the site at the time. Without doing site survey, it was a lot of inconclusive results. However, there was one thing that kind of tipped us off to the fact that they might have intended to use part of this original structure, and that was the gatehouse in the early design. So the gatehouse, as you can see from these sketches, is asymmetrical compared to everything else in the plan. And Elizabethan architecture was all about symmetry, especially Robert Smithson's designs. So the fact that this asymmetrical placement of this gatehouse was there and was unlike any of his other plans. It really seemed to hint the fact that this was reusing a medieval structure that stood there, or at least the footprint of one that had used to be there. Another thing that we discovered about the earlier design was this idea of a grand approach. So there was only really two places within the moat that the earlier design would have fit because of the shape of the moat, so that the structure either stood at the north end or the south end of the moat. And I ended up deciding that it probably, both structures would probably sat in the same part of the island, so I put it at the north end. And because of this orientation, as we'll see in the video, this creates from an interesting path. So you approach Slingsby Castle from the south. That's where the main roads are into town. So you'd come up from the south and you'd have to wind your way all the way around to the north side of the structure where the main entrance stood, and then go over this bridge and through the entrance. And this is very reminiscent of what happens at Bodiam Castle, which is actually used as a study for landscape design. So this is really intentional. And here we see the awkward entrance through the back gate where we have to turn in the path because of that asymmetrical placement of the gatehouse. And this is the approach to the built design, much more straightforward, straight in from the south. So the building of the 3D models also raised a lot of questions that had never been raised before. For instance, in the historical sketches of the built structure, there was conflicting roof lines. So in one version there were these balustrades, and the other one was the battlements. So I had to research what might have been and then come to a conclusion based on my research. So I ended up leaving in the balustrades. Another thing was that it was not clear what the staircase would have looked like in this structure based on the drawings. So I had to use comparative examples to finally come up with a final design for that. And for the earlier design, the moat shape in the drawing is very square, but this was a medieval moat. It had been there for at least 400 years by the time that this sketch was drawn, so there's no way it would have been that perfect. So the question was raised, were they intending to rebuild the moat in this square fashion so it would be symmetrical, or was that just a representation in the drawing? So as you can see, another researcher may have come up with a lot of different interpretations of the same material. So it was really influenced on my understanding of the evidence. However, it did lead to a better understanding of a very misunderstood and lost site, and illuminated some fascinating parts of the English architectural transition between Elizabethan and Jacobean styles. And the questions that it raised were really important and might not have been asked otherwise. So my current and future work, as you can see, there's a lot of potential for using immersive technology to understand the past, and my startup experience Heritage helps museums and heritage groups to engage with this potential. And we create 3D models, touchscreens, virtual reality and augmented reality, apps and games for use in exhibits or online, so that can allow heritage professionals to engage their visitors. My future goal is to work part-time as a PhD student also to research how we can use gaming technology and immersive gaming technology to better understand a lost site and movement through that space. So I hope you've enjoyed this talk. It was a very brief introduction to a vast topic. And if you have any questions, I hope you can contact me at my email address, which I'll link here, or visit my website, experience.heritage.com. Thank you.